Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The show starts in 3, 2, 1, go.
Good morning, CaneSport. It's October 7th, 2021. I'm Gary Ferman, the publisher of CaneSport.com, joined as always by our managing editor, Matt Shodell, as we discuss the news of the day. And all right, so Matt, yesterday we talked a lot about offense. We had the analysis of what we've seen so far in offense this season and kicked around some of the suggestions that maybe the coaches can take a look at here during an open week to try to make things better. And today we take a look at the defensive side of the ball. And, you know, it's funny, we were sitting here a year ago and all the conversation was about Blake Baker. Blake Baker had to go. Blake Baker was doing a horrible job running the defense. And the end of the season came. Blake Baker went. Manny Diaz takes over the defense. But when we dove hard into what's going on the defensive side of the ball right now, there really wasn't much of a difference from last year to this year. In fact, things have kind of seemed to get worse.
Yeah, I mean, like we talked about yesterday briefly, you know, I was never a proponent of Manny Diaz, you know, taking over as defense coordinator and head coach. And you could see right now the monumental task he has as a head coach, and now he's also got to run the defense. I mean, this isn't just a defensive problem on this team. This team needs a head coach. This team needs 2 coordinators, and they don't have it, you know, and it's hard to fix this deep of a problem with the culture and with both sides of the ball when you only got 2 guys basically running it, instead of 2 coordinators and a head coach who's overseeing it. So I am not optimistic about a defensive fix. I do think the offense has a much better chance of getting on track than the defense. I just don't see a lot that's going to happen on defense. Just knowing how Manny Diaz has run his defense forever, knowing his stubbornness with the personnel that we've seen over, you know, the last few years, it's just probably not going to happen. So if Miami's going to, you know, make some sort of magical run for the ACC Coastal, it's going to be on the offensive side of the ball, in my opinion.
Well, I'll say this: you're right about what you said. You flat said from day one that you didn't like Manny Diaz taking over the defense, and I was on the polar opposite side. I did like it because it was apparent to me that he was in a bit of trouble potential trouble coming into this year, and that he was going to basically have to show even more progress than he'd already had, or things would potentially go the way they're going right now. And I felt that he was making a smart move, taking things into his own hands. And so I was supportive of his decision to do so. However, what you're saying definitely applies right now. Things are not going well. The job of the head coach has gotten a lot more complicated. You know, players were fighting with each other in practice this week. You know, there's just, you know, recruiting is kind of really struggling. There's so many aspects of this program right now that need the attention of the head coach that he has to address. And, you know, it's got to be hard to also apply the same degree of game planning and time to face the 3 offensive teams. I mean, let's talk next 3 games. You're playing pretty good offensive teams 3 weeks in a row. Then he's got to stop them. And yeah, his head's got to be racing. He's got to be all over the place mentally. And I'm sure it's a bit of a battle for him right now. No doubt about it.
Yeah, and by the way, I'll bring this up too, since you mentioned the fight that was reported. Like, you know, we've been begging for fights in practice. Not like we want to have a fight, but this is not the kind of fight we were talking about. Like, when there have been fights in the past in practice, it's because it's an O lineman and D lineman getting after it rep after rep so hard and putting so much into it that they get, you know, upset when they're not able to win a rep. This was just guys being lazy. I mean, right. And getting called out for it. Like, that's not the kind of fight you want to have. I guess, you know, they put a positive spin on it, the person who wrote about it, but like, there's nothing positive about this kind of fight at all in my mind. I mean, this is not the kind of fight you want to have where guys are just being lackadaisical and some other guys like, you know, step it up or else because I'm being punished too. Like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a problem holding each other accountable in the locker room. I don't see any issues with that. But yeah, I mean, this was a big distraction. I mean, they had a player-only meeting
Well,
afterwards.
that's good. I mean, that's
You
not
know,
that's not bad. But why does it take a fight when guys are being lazy in practice to have a players only? I could have told you they needed a players only meeting for being lazy after the first week of fall drills. I mean, it took them this long and this many losses to realize, hey, we need a players only meeting. Like that's also the whole thing is ridiculous to me. The way that it's from what has leaked out from this week in practice, not encouraging to me at all. It sounds like a team falling apart, not a team coming together. It sounds like a meeting that was called because the team's falling apart, not to ward off this sort of thing from happening in the first place, which is what it should have been. It's just there's a lack of leadership at the top in the team. I mean, just the fact this is even leaking out, it's just not a good look to me.
All right, so you mentioned the word leak, and it leaked. And the question I have is, did it leak on purpose? Is this a diversion from all the negative noise that's been out in the public domain?
It's funny you say that because they leaked it to a Herald reporter who tried to put a positive spin on it, which I know the reporter. Normally, this would not get a positive spin from anybody. I mean, it's ridiculous. They're fighting with each other because they're not working hard in practice. You put a positive spin on that. To me, that says it was leaked on purpose with the idea like, hey, make it look like, guys are really getting after it. Whatever. I mean, I'm speculating, okay? But it's just weird that it leaks now when Manny's really wanted everything not to leak for a long time. And when we find out things that we're asked not to publish, we don't. Obviously, this reporter was told, publish it, feel free, with the idea, I guess, that it was going to get a positive spin. I don't know. But anyway, go ahead.
All right. So we have an analysis of the defense on the site this morning, which gives you a really good look at some of the different numbers and how the defense has been performing. And it's been coming up short. Let's be honest. It's been definitely coming up short. So we give you a look at that this morning. We also give you another analysis, and this is a really interesting topic, and that's Miami coming off of bye weeks. And the record has not been very good for several years rather. In 2018, coming off a bye week, they got beat pretty handily by Boston College. 2019, they came off a bye week, lost to North Carolina. 2020, they came off a bye week, lost to Clemson. So this team has not, for some reason, Matt, played well coming off of bye weeks. And I don't know if it's like one of those phony trends that's just coincidental, or if there's really something that's creating this problem. Your thoughts?
I mean, look, Miami hasn't been winning a ton of games anyway, but they certainly haven't been going, on average 1-5, which is what I think it's been the last 3 years under Manny or whatever it is, after bye weeks. Like that's way worse than just a normal, 6-game stretch of any games. And I think the one win, one of the wins in the last several years was against Toledo, which shouldn't even count. But yeah, I can't explain it. There's clearly been something wrong with the culture at Miami, and guys just sort of being lazy. And you saw it with the reported fight, and you see it's not being fixed, and it's disturbing because we both covered this team when the stuff that goes on in practice nowadays, they would rather not play a game than practice like that. They would rather not practice for a whole week than practice like that. And I don't understand why it can't be fixed. You punish kids not by having them run gassers or, kill themselves in practices as punishment. You punish kids by taking away their playing time. And Manny doesn't seem to really do that, other than the kids who get caught, doing drugs or violation of team rules is usually that sort of thing. You don't see just an outside discipline like you didn't practice well, you're not playing this week. And I can tell you, we watched so many practices and we've seen guys walking through drills. Last year we saw Mark Pope literally not even practicing, like barely trying. Coach didn't call him out, and he played the next week. And you don't think other players see that? They certainly see that. They're right next to these guys, and it's just at some point, the coach has to put his foot down. I mean, there were times where you and I were sitting there watching practice, and we said to each other, if we're the coach of this team right now, we stop practice right now, and we call this whole team together and just say, if you guys aren't going to bother trying, just go home.
Yeah,
because that's how bad it was. And this is under Manny Diaz, and it just doesn't seem like anything's changing. And as a guy who covered the team, I started covering the team in 2001. I was at the Rose Bowl, covering the Rose Bowl, and I was like, this is going to be great. This is going to be every year.
Great. Yeah, great.
And
welcome to my new job. It's going to be like this every single year.
And like, if you told me that was going to be really the only, the highlight of my entire career covering the team, I wouldn't have believed you.
I know.
And as you look back, as in retrospect, in hindsight, you can see the decline and you can see the culture change, covering the team as closely as both of us have. And that just makes it so much more disturbing when a guy like Manny Diaz, who knows what happened, who was a fan back in the day, who wanted to bring UM back to what it was and tried to bring them back to what it was, but just didn't understand that the players now aren't like the players then, and you have to do it differently. It's not just make them run gassers after a loss or make them run up the steps in the stadium because they lost a home game. It's you punish them with playing time. And you don't play 8 guys in a rotation that's even on the defensive line, for instance, which he does. You play the 4 guys who earned it in practice, and they play 75% to 95% of the snaps because they're conditioned all offseason to do that. And because the offensive linemen play every single snap. You can't convince me that the 4 backup defensive linemen should be just as good as the starting 4. It's never been that way. And this, what makes them fight hard in practice if they know they're going to play 30, 40% of the snaps regardless of how they practice? There's no next man up mentality. It's an every man up mentality because everyone plays. You've got to take away playing time at some point. And, we've been sort of begging for that. And it's never happened. But that's the only way these kids learn, because their money is in the NFL. They obviously aren't always, pumped up to go to practice. They have other stuff going on in their lives. They're college students. But when you take away their playing time and they see they may not be making it to the NFL and they'll have to get a job after college, it's a real job. Like, you and I don't have real jobs, but we're close to having real jobs. That's what changes the mindset. And that's what changes the culture. When players realize, hey, I didn't practice hard, now I'm not playing for 2 weeks, or this guy just beat me out because I didn't practice hard.
Yep.
The rest of the team sees that and they practice harder because of that, and that makes the whole team better. And they've never, to me, that's the culture change. That's Manny Diaz, he talks about the culture change and this and that, what he plans to do. At the end of the day, that's the culture change. That's all it is. You're playing or you're not playing because of how hard you work. That's simple to me.
All right, so we've got those 2 analysis pieces on the site this morning for you guys to dive into. Recommend you look at them both. And then a couple really good recruiting stories for you guys to sink into. Jaylen Brown, he's a 4-star right now, but he's looking a lot like he's going to be a 5-star. The wide receiver from Miami Gulliver, he was at the game Thursday. We spoke to him, got his review, and got an update on where he stands in recruiting. And then here comes that T-Rob name again. T-Rob has continued to stay all over. The 5-star defensive back, Jaheim Singletary from upstate. And surprisingly, Miami's hanging in there in the top 3 for him. So that tells you T-Rob's doing a damn good job staying on top of that recruitment. Not going to make any predictions on how that one's going to end, but Miami's still very much in it with Jaheim Singletary. Obviously, also, you've got the podcast from the Lamar Thomas show last night, which was great as always to dive into. So a lot of content on the site, and we'll be continuing to bring you more as things develop along the way. But some good things for you guys to sink into this morning on the website. So that's going to do it for today. For Matt Shodell, I'm Gary Ferman. We thank you for joining us for Good Morning CaneSport. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody.